Before this video starts, I'd just like to plug my Patreon. For as little as $2 a month, you get early ad-free access to all videos, and higher tiers get their name on the screen and a shout-out at the end of each video. Videos will also be mostly uncensored on there too, so if that interests you, click the link in the description or the pinned comment. Well, it's been over a year. Time to dive back into the NSFL section of the Lost Media Wiki to find some more examples of disturbing lost media. I'm sure you all know how this works by now, so I think that we should just get right into it. But before that, remember, this is lost media. I can't show you what isn't publicly available, so please don't leave any comments complaining about me not showing anything, because I literally don't have this media in my possession. That's all I ask. Anyway, here are 9 more pieces of dark and disturbing lost media. On July 6, 1898, an African-American man named Edward Heinsohn was hanged in the yard of a county jail in Jacksonville, Florida. He'd been convicted of assaulting a 14-year-old white girl. While he'd maintained his innocence right up until the end, it unfortunately wasn't enough to save him, and somebody actually filmed the execution. The American Mutoscope Company sent a cameraman down to Jacksonville to capture the whole thing. This was the same company that would eventually become the Biograph Company, one of the most important early film studios in history. At the time though, they were mostly producing short novelty clips for peep show machines that could be found in arcades and amusement halls. These were the places where people would use a coin, crank a handle, and watch a few seconds of moving pictures flicker past. On that day in July, the moving pictures people wanted to see were of a man dying. The execution was supposed to be private, but word got out, and Jacksonville residents started showing up. The local sheriff tried to limit who could get in, banning almost all women from attending. The film that came out of it was entitled An Execution by Hanging, and it became the second known instance of a real execution being captured on film, the first being the hanging of a man named William Carr a year earlier in 1897. The Biograph catalogue later promoted the film with a description calling it a very interesting subject. They noted the condemned man walking up the platform with clergymen beside him before the trap was released. This was clearly being used as a selling point. The film did well commercially and was still being distributed as late as 1902, and some reports suggest screenings continued all the way up until 1905. For years, paying customers watched Edward Heinsohn die over and over again in arcades and penny parlors. Back then, people didn't even try to hide it. This was just another thing that they could watch for a penny. As for the film itself, it's gone, or rather, it's not publicly available. The only known surviving copy is a Mutoscope reel that was sold to a private collector at auction in 2015, and aside from a few still photographs, no footage has been made available to the public. Whoever bought that reel has it sitting somewhere, and that's about all anyone knows. Of course, there's one thing noting about the context here. This was 1898 in the American South. Heinsohn pleaded not guilty and kept saying he was innocent, but he was convicted all the same. The racial dynamics of the case are impossible to separate from the outcome, and some historians who've written about the film have pointed out that its commercial success was tied to broader patterns of white audiences paying to watch violence against black Americans. The American Mutoscope Company went on to become one of the foundational studies of cinema. They hired D.W. Griffith, who was of course the director of the infamous Birth of a Nation, and apparently helped invent the fade-out. The company eventually folded in 1928, but before any of that, they pointed a camera at a man on a gallows and sold the footage, and now almost nobody can see it because it belongs to one anonymous collector, which I think we can all agree is certainly an odd thing to want to own. By the way, if you're new to this channel or if you've been watching for a while and you still haven't subscribed, please consider doing so because it really helps me out. Also, be sure to click the notification bell so you never miss out on one of my videos. Also, consider giving this video a like as well because that will really help out too. Anyway, back to the video. Countdown has been on Channel 4 since 1982. It was the first thing ever broadcast on the channel, and over 8,000 episodes later is still going. In the show, 2 contestants sit across from each other, make words out of random letters, and do number puzzles, all while the show's iconic timer theme plays. It's a bit like Jeopardy's theme, only a bit more tense. It's the kind of show that old ladies watch with a cup of tea on a weekday, though there have been some rather humorous outtakes that had to be left off the show because contestants found swear words in the letters they were given.
C.
And another.
L.
And a vowel.
I.
And a consonant.
T.
Kirk.
7.
Anne?
Only 6.
What's your 6, Anne?
Retard.
Retard. And the 7?
Tetrode.
Okay, I'll look up tetrode. Retard, you need 2 R's, and I'm afraid there's only one there.
Now then, Gino.
7.
7 again. And Lawrence?
7.
7. Let's say Lawrence is 7, please.
Not sure if I dare say this one. Wankers.
Wankers. Well, certainly it is said by many people. There's no question about it. Wankers. I'd be interested to see if that's got in the dictionary. Gino?
We've got a pair of wankers.
A pair of wankers.
Sorry.
Is it in?
Sorry.
It's in.
Oh, it's in.
They anticipated my next line. What is Richard Whiteley doing asking for a definition?
That said, there have been 2 occasions where producers found out a little too late who they'd invited on. The first time was in 1997. A man named Alan Horn from Bridlington turned up to tape an episode. He was a former official at HM Customs and Excise, and like every other contestant, he had a publicity photograph taken ahead of broadcast. He played his game, lost 42-22, and that was that. Under normal circumstances, the episode would have aired on July 9th, and nobody would have thought twice about it. But when those publicity photos hit the local papers in Bridlington, people recognised him. What the producers at Yorkshire Television didn't know was that Horn had sexually abused 2 girls under the age of 14. He'd been charged with 13 counts of gross indecency back in 1982, pleaded guilty to 5, and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. After his release, he was apparently still well known in Bridlington for what he'd done, so when locals saw his face in the paper being promoted as a countdown contestant, the reaction was immediate. Channel 4 and Yorkshire Television agreed the episode couldn't air. They replaced it with a repeat of the 2000th episode special, and as such, episode 2045 has never been broadcast. Then it happened again in 2013. A former teacher named Mark Harrison was set to appear in Series 69. His episode was scheduled for July 2nd, with Harrison playing a contestant named Steve Grimble, but before it could air, it came out that Harrison had been convicted for pursuing a relationship with a 14-year-old girl. He was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. Once again, Channel 4 pulled the episode. They swapped it out for one of their pre-recorded special episodes. Harrison's game has also never been seen by the public. What's odd about both cases is how close they came to airing. The vetting process at the time clearly wasn't catching this kind of thing. Contestants filled out application forms, showed up, played their games, and went home. And it was only afterward, when publicity shots were shown, that anyone noticed. Countdown's application form now requires hopeful contestants to disclose any criminal convictions or ongoing investigations before they're considered. That change came because of situations like these. Neither episode has ever surfaced online. There are no leaked recordings and no still images. They were taped, which means they exist on a shelf somewhere in Channel 4's archives, but they've been locked away. These were 2 half-hour shows of daytime television that became unsalvageable the moment someone recognized the contestants. The games themselves were probably perfectly ordinary. Somewhere in a vault, there's footage of 2 convicted child sex offenders cheerfully solving word puzzles on afternoon TV, and the only reason anyone cares about these episodes at all is that they'll never get to see them. On February 22, 1950, Georgie Small and Laverne Roach stepped into the ring at St. Nicholas Arena in Manhattan for a middleweight bout that CBS was broadcasting live to a few million viewers at home. Only about 1,800 people had actually shown up in person, on account of the sleet and snow outside. It was supposed to be a stepping stone fight for Roach, which would have eventually set him up for a shot at Sugar Ray Robinson. Instead, it became the first televised boxing match to end in tragedy. Roach was 25 years old, born and raised in Plainview, Texas. He joined the Marines during the war and turned out to be a phenomenal boxer, good enough that Gene Tunney personally gave him an award for being the best fighter that the Corps produced during World War II. After his discharge, he went professional in 1945 and tore through his first 18 opponents without a loss. Ring Magazine named him Rookie of the Year in 1947, and he looked like a future champion. Then came Marcel Cerdan. In March of 1948, the French middleweight champion beat Roach badly at Madison Square Garden, knocking him down multiple times across 8 rounds before the referee stopped it. Some boxing writers would later argue that Roach never fully recovered from that fight. He stepped away from the sport for about 18 months, went back to Plainview, married his high school sweetheart, and started selling insurance and repairing tires. But eventually, the ring pulled him back. He won a few comeback bouts and got matched with Georgie Small, a crafty Brooklyn middleweight with a 38-6 record. Roach was the favourite going in, and by most accounts, he was winning comfortably through the early rounds. If the fight had gone to the judges, he almost certainly would have taken it, but in the later rounds, Small connected with a hard right that changed the whole complexion of the fight. Roach couldn't recover. He was knocked down twice in the 10th round, and the referee had to step in to stop it. After the stoppage, Roach told the people around him he was fine. Then he lapsed into a coma. 14 hours later, he died of a subdural hemorrhage at St. Clair's Hospital. He turned 25 just one day before the fight. Because the knockout came before the scheduled end of the broadcast, CBS had about 10 minutes of airtime left to fill, and the camera stayed on Roach while he was still conscious and talking to his corner. Viewers at home watched the whole thing unfold in real time without understanding what they were seeing. Small kept fighting after that, but most top boxers refused to face him. He carried on until 1955, though accounts say he never got past the guilt of what happened. Sugar Ray Robinson reportedly pulled out of a scheduled fight with Small once he found out Small had killed someone in the ring. A decade later, Small told True magazine he wanted to be a fighter his whole life, and one night took that away from him. The CBS broadcast was live, and like most television from that era, nobody recorded it. Millions of people watched Laverne die on their television sets, and no footage of it has ever been found.
The life we live, guys, is a differential of margins that's almost unmeasurable. What is successful and what is failure, the differential are so small. We're talking about seconds. We're talking about, reps. We're talking about the finest echelon of measurement that will make or break someone's life to be successful at that moment. And once at that moment successful, that gives a birth of a lifestyle that's unbeatable, second to none. But in order to have that first success, you must ensure yourself that you're giving it all you can today, because the future we don't know, do we? We're training for that.
Greg Plitt was one of the most recognizable fitness models in America. He'd been on over 200 magazine covers, appeared in Bravo's reality series Workout, had a role in the Stallone and De Niro film Grudge Match, and even provided the body reference for Dr. Manhattan in the Watchmen movie. Before any of that, he graduated from West Point and served 5 years in the Army as a captain and ranger. By all accounts, he was someone who ran towards intensity rather than away from it, and the people around him knew that about him. On January 17, 2015, Plitt was in Burbank, California, near the Metrolink commuter rail station, filming promotional content for an energy drink called Way Up that he co-owned. He had full creative control over the brand's advertising, and that afternoon, the concept he'd come up with involved outrunning a train. He brought a 2-person crew. They didn't have a filming permit from the Burbank Police Department, and they hadn't contacted Metrolink to arrange any kind of safety protocol. There was no flagman assigned, and nobody knew the train schedule, and the whole shoot was essentially trespassing on active railway property. This wasn't the first time Plitt had filmed on those tracks. Videos on his own website show previous workout shoots in the same spot, right next to the Burbank station. He'd been in and around the rail line before without incident, which may have contributed to why he felt comfortable doing it again. That afternoon, a southbound Metrolink train carrying about 180 passengers approached the station. According to police who later reviewed the footage, Plitt got into a sprinter's stance on the tracks as the train came towards him and started running. The conductor saw him, hit the brakes, and blasted the horn for at least 10 seconds. Plitt didn't move off the tracks. The train caught up to him and struck him. He was pronounced dead at the scene, at 37 years old. The accounts of what exactly went wrong vary. His girlfriend told police afterward that Plitt believed the train was on an adjacent track, not the one he was standing on. A nearby security camera operator said Plitt had been moving around the area for about 2 hours before the accident, occasionally visible on CCTV. One of his close friends said Plitt simply tripped on the uneven ground and couldn't get back up in time. The crew members told Burbank police they had no idea Plitt was going to run between the rails. His autopsy found trace amounts of methamphetamine and MDMA in his system, though the coroner noted that the levels were too low to have been a contributing factor. Multiple cameras captured parts of what happened. The Metrolink train had an unbound event recorder that filmed the collision. The crew's own camera was seized by police as evidence, and the footage on it confirmed Plitt running on the tracks as the train bore down on him. A nearby business had security camera footage showing him in the area beforehand. None of this footage has ever been released to the public. The crew's camera, the train's onboard recording, and the security footage, all of it went into the police investigation and stayed there. Plitt's friends and family were left with the videos already on his website, some of which showed him doing the exact same kind of shoot on those exact same tracks, and nothing from the day went wrong. If you were on YouTube at any point during the 2010s, there's a decent chance you came across Grant Thompson's channel. He ran The King of Random, a DIY and science experiments page that pulled in over 11 million subscribers and billions of views. His most popular video was a tutorial on making gummy candy shaped like Lego bricks, which alone has almost 50 million views today. Before YouTube, Thompson had been an airline pilot and had run a real estate business. He started the channel in 2010 as a hobby, went full-time by 2016, and by the time he stepped back from hosting duties to let newer presenters take over, he built something with real reach. He was 38, had a wife and kids, and had recently gotten into paramotoring, which is essentially paragliding with a motor strapped to your back. His brother said he picked it up about 5 months before and had become obsessed with it. On July 29, 2019, Thompson went out paramotoring near Sand Hollow State Park in Hurricane, Utah, and sadly he would never make it home. His family called the Washington County Sheriff's Office around 10:30 that night to report him missing. Officers pulled his coordinates from a GPS locator he'd been carrying, and a helicopter found his body that night at the crash site, along with his paragliding equipment and a camera. That camera had been mounted to his paramotor and it recorded everything. Investigators reviewed the footage and determined that a sudden change in the updraft caused Thompson's parachute to collapse while he was about 100 feet off the ground. He realized what was happening immediately and tried to deploy his reserve chute, but the whole sequence from malfunction to impact took roughly 4 seconds. The reserve did deploy, but far too late to slow his descent, and he died on impact. The footage apparently makes it clear that there was nothing Thompson could have done. The failure happened too close and too fast to the ground for any corrective action to matter. According to law enforcement sources who spoke about the video, Thompson recognized the problem the instant it started, but simply didn't have the altitude or time to save himself. His death was announced the next day, and the tributes came quickly. YouTube itself even put out a statement. His channel uploaded a 1-minute memorial, just a photo of Thompson with his birth and death years. A few days later, his co-host, Nathan Callie, appeared on camera for the first time since his death and confirmed the channel would keep going, saying it was what Grant would have wanted. The King of Random, now abbreviated to TKOR, is still active and still uploading. As for the footage from the paramotor camera, law enforcement sources told TMZ they were adamant it would never be released to the public. It remains in the hands of investigators, and there's no indication that the family has any interest in it seeing the light of day either. The camera that was supposed to film another afternoon of paramotoring ended up capturing the last 4 seconds of Grant Thompson's life instead.
I think you are the only person in television who had a guest. The expression in show business is you die. You've all heard that, comedians said, boy, I performed and I died, which means you did not do well, you bombed out. But you actually had somebody expire. Did you not, on one of your shows one night?
I did, yes. It was, I think we talked about this once in private, that this could happen because of the tension of talk shows, it's amazing, you might be talking to somebody and they would keel over. The fates fingered me as the talk show host about 6 years ago, I would say.
Jerome Rodale was, depending on who you asked, either a visionary or a crank. By 1971, he'd spent decades telling Americans to stop eating processed food, to grow their produce organically, and treat their bodies like something worth maintaining. He founded Prevention Magazine, which is still around today, and Organic Gardening and Farming, which at its peak was selling over 700,000 copies a year. He also popularized the word organic as it relates to food, before most people had any idea what it meant. So far, all the things I've listed about him have been good points, but he was also an anti-vaxxer, believed rimless glasses caused cancer, and once claimed that polio could be prevented through diet alone. In other words, he was a very complicated man. But by the early 70s, the culture had started catching up to at least some of what he'd been saying, and he was riding a wave of mainstream attention that had eluded him for years. The New York Times magazine put him on their cover on June 6, 1971, calling him the guru of the organic food cult. 2 days later, he was dead. On June 8th, Rodale taped a segment for the Dick Cavett Show on ABC. At the time, he was 72 years old and came out swinging. He told Cavett he'd never felt better in his life. He joked about falling down a flight of stairs and laughing all the way down. He also said he decided to live to 100. He'd previously quipped that he would make it to 100 unless he got run down by some sugar-crazed taxi driver. At one point, he offered Cavett some of his special asparagus, which he said had been boiled in urine. The audience didn't know quite what to do with that one. Cavett found him genuinely entertaining and was already thinking about having him back. Rodale's segment ran about 30 minutes. When it wrapped, he moved to a seat on the couch, while Cavett brought out his next guest, New York Post columnist Peter Hamill. A few minutes into the Hamill interview, Rodale made a noise that sounded like a loud snore. His head dropped to the side. Hamill leaned over to Cavett and whispered something along the lines of, quote, "This looks bad." The audience laughed because from where they were sitting, it looked like a bit like someone pretending to fall asleep to get a reaction. Cavett didn't laugh. He said many times since that he knew, instantly and without explanation, that Rodale was dead. Cavett called out for a doctor. 2 medical interns in the audience ran up onto the stage. 2 flight attendants sitting in the front row, who'd been joking with Cavett during commercial breaks, started crying. Cavett later said that they seemed to recognize from their training what was actually happening before most of the audience did. Police and EMTs filled the set. Rodale was taken out on a stretcher to Roosevelt Hospital, where he was pronounced dead on arrival. The cause was a heart attack. ABC never aired the episode, and neither Cavett nor the network ever tried to exploit the footage. Cavett went home that night, and the next morning he called Johnny Carson, unsure how he could ever walk out and do another show. Carson told him that it was like Kennedy's death, that you just go out and do it.
Maybe if you're that close to death, you somehow intuit it without really realizing it. But I found myself holding his wrist. I don't remember getting up, and I don't know what I was going to do. I don't know what a pulse is supposed to feel like or where to find it or anything.
Oh, you know that when there isn't one, though,
Yeah.
that the man is probably...
That's the time to get out your 4-leaf clover.
Right.
Speaking of superstition. But it is a curious feeling. And the next thing I knew, some firemen had been summoned from across the street, and they were pounding on his chest and so forth. And I remember thinking, I must call Johnny.
Yes.
This came across my mind because I've called you. I remember thinking I would call you and ask you how you go out the next night after someone has died and it's been in all the papers and go into. And now here's Phyllis Diller, you know?
Yeah, make that transition.
And it really is tough.
That has got to be a very strange feeling.
The tape of the show exists, or at least it did. Cavett watched it back a few weeks later with some of his production staff. It's possible copies were made informally within the network, but the episode has never been broadcast or released in any form. What's strange though is how many people are absolutely certain that they saw it. Cavett has said that he gets approached about 20 times a year by people who insist they watch Rodale die on television. They'll describe the moment in detail, fully convinced. They didn't see it, however. They heard Cavett tell the story so vividly and so often over the years that it became a memory of something that never actually reached their own screen. Kiss My Axe was a performance troupe out of Newton that did stage medieval combat, involving sword fights, broadswords, and fantasy battle scenes. They've been around since 1993, co-founded by a 40-year-old father of 7 named Neil James, who lived in Tamworth and was unemployed at the time but saw real potential in the group. And he wasn't wrong. Within a couple of years, they'd landed spots at Glastonbury, the Phoenix Festival, and Coombe Abbey. James himself was known for playing Guy of Gisborne, and by all accounts, he was good at it. The group had built up a following on the festival circuit, and they were starting to get booked at bigger venues. On January 19, 1995, Kiss My Axe were performing at Wembley Conference Centre in London. Their closing act was called Death Blow, a choreographed sword fight between James and fellow member Matt Page. They rehearsed it extensively. James wore a leather tunic and was scripted to lose the fight. About 70 people were watching. During the final exchange, Page brought his broadsword down in an overhead strike, and the blade snapped. A 15-inch piece of the broken sword embedded itself in James's inner left thigh, severing his femoral artery. Page and the rest of the group didn't realize at first how bad it was. James was on the ground, but they assumed he was still in character. Then the blood started pooling, and it became obvious this wasn't part of the show. Wembley's paramedics rushed the stage, and Page used his own belt as a tourniquet to try to slow the bleeding. James suffered a heart attack while still unconscious on the stage. He was taken to hospital, but the damage was too severe. He had 4 heart attacks in total and couldn't stop hemorrhaging. He died the following day. The inquest took place on May 30th, 1995 at Hornsey Coroner's Court. Investigators determined that the broadsword had been made from excessively brittle steel, which is what caused it to snap under the impact of the overhead clash. The sword should never have been used in a live performance. A health and safety expert who examined the weapon confirmed as much. Page, who had praised James's sword fighting ability in a newspaper interview just days after the accident, was not held personally responsible. The coroner's verdict treated the death as a tragic accident caused by a faulty weapon. The whole performance had been recorded by a professional cameraman. After James died, the tape was handed over to police and became part of the investigation. The coroner viewed the footage during the inquest, but decided not to show it to the jury. Given what it captured, that makes sense. The recording shows a man being fatally wounded by a broken sword in front of a live audience, and there's been no indication that anyone involved has any desire to make it public. It remains with the authorities. Kiss My Axe kept going after James's death. They vowed to continue performing in his honor, and even planned to direct a portion of their future fees to James's widow and 7 children. By 1995, they were set to headline the supporting entertainment at Glastonbury, and the group eventually became a recurring fixture on the festival circuit. They even got to mention on the official Glastonbury website's 1998 history page, listed as the theatre highlight, but the performance at Wembley the one where everything went wrong, exists only on a tape that nobody outside of the investigation has ever seen. This is the only piece of lost media in this video that's classed as partially found. The Jeremy Kyle Show ran on ITV for 14 years from 2005 to 2019, over 3,000 episodes. If you're not familiar with it, it was basically like the Jerry Springer Show but British, with a host, Jeremy Kyle himself, who positioned himself as a moral authority rather than a ringmaster. Guests came on to confront their partners over infidelity, attempt to hash out family disputes, and of course take lie detector tests. Jeremy would berate the ones he thought were lying, and the audience would boo or cheer on cue, and the whole thing ran 5 mornings a week. A judge once described it as a human form of bear baiting. ITV kept making it anyway because people watched it, and 2 of those people who watched it all the time were in fact me and my mom. Yes, I'll admit I actually found it quite entertaining at the time, mostly because of how bizarre some of the guests looked. Particularly their teeth. They really lived up to the whole stereotype of British people having terrible teeth. Some of them looked like that if you handed them a toothbrush, they honestly wouldn't know what to do with it. Jeremy himself could be a bit insufferable at times. He'd often get right in the faces of the guests he was insulting, knowing that they probably wouldn't try to hit him because he always had a massive security guard standing in the background. But there are 2 cases where I will give him some credit. The first is when he told off his own audience for laughing at a man who got injured after he was locked out of the flat by his girlfriend.
She locked me in the flat one day.
She locked you in the flat?
Yeah, she locked me in the flat. Obviously, me being angry, I didn't know the door was locked. I've gone over, I've grabbed the door handle, pulled it, and it's come straight off in my hands. So we're stuck on a 3-storey flat, and I've had to jump off a 3-storey balcony. I ripped all my back, all my legs, and I ended up in hospital, you know, because she won't let me out of the house.
It's not funny, though. Can I tell you why it's not funny? And I don't want to upset any of the audience, because I completely appreciate the fact that you're here, but I'll tell you why I don't think you should laugh. If this was the other way around, and a woman was sat here, and a bloke had locked her in a flat, and she had to jump out and injured herself, you lot would not be laughing. You would be saying, he's a complete nightmare, he should be locked up, and that's disgraceful. But somehow, if it happens to a bloke, that's funny. That's not funny, is it? That isn't.
And of course the other where he yelled at the absolute waste of oxygen that is Mick Philpott.
We all work.
You don't work.
Oh, yes, I do work.
Yeah, I know your argument on this. Just give it to us. You say I look after my kids. What's wrong with a man looking after his kids other than a woman?
That's correct. What is wrong with a man looking after his children? I mean, I'm old-fashioned. I believe the man should be at work, but unfortunately, because the media keeps putting this certain story in the paper, I cannot get a job.
You can't get a job because of what?
Criminal record. I said, you do,
Why
mate.
are you so
I will
defensive?
Because when it comes to my kids, I'm very, very
I've just
defensive.
complimented your kids!
After I had a go at you.
I just said that
Listen,
ever
just
since...
get out, just talk to that, pal. Talk to that. You're not worth it.
I complimented your kids. I complimented your kids, and I sat and listened to you, and all I was saying was how good they looked. You have jumped out of your box with one hell of a chip on your shoulder. You haven't even had anybody say anything to you so far, and you're making signs. No. You've no reason to do that. But I'll tell you something, when a grown man who purports to be a good father, probably he is, sits on national television and does that, no wonder you can't get a damn job.
Mick's currently in prison for killing 6 of his children in a house fire. Eventually I stopped watching it because I guess I got bored, but my mom carried on watching it all the way until 2019. In fact, she even managed to get a ticket to be in the audience of one of the episodes. But that episode would never come, and that's where we get into the actual story of this segment. On May 2nd, 2019, a 63-year-old man named Steve Diamond from Portsmouth filmed an episode. He got on the show to prove to his fiancée, Jane Callahan, that he hadn't been unfaithful to her. They'd split up over the allegations, and Diamond believed that if he took the show's polygraph test and passed, she'd take him back. Unfortunately, he didn't pass. The lie detector determined he was being deceptive, and from that point on, the taping went about as well as you'd expect. Jeremy told Diamond he was a serial liar and told him to be a man and grow a pair of balls and tell the truth, and the audience booed. Diamond sat there visibly shell-shocked, protesting that he hadn't cheated. After the recording wrapped, he told a researcher on the show that he wished he was dead. The aftercare team assessed him, noted that he was, quote, emotionally contained within about 30 minutes, and cleared him to go home. His landlady later said he was talking about killing himself in the taxi on the way back. Over the next few days, Diamond was in pieces. His brother Leslie spoke to him over the phone and said he sounded completely broken, that he kept saying he couldn't go on living. One of his final messages to Callahan read, "I hope the Jeremy Kyle Show is so happy now as to what they have done to me." He wrote that they were responsible for what happened next. 7 days after the taping, on May 9th, police found Diamond dead at his home in Portsmouth. ITV pulled the episode immediately and never broadcast it. Within days, they suspended all filming and broadcasting of the show. By May 15th, they cancelled it permanently. Then they started scrubbing. The show's YouTube channel, Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram, and its official website were all deleted. ITV removed virtually every trace of the Jeremy Kyle show on its platforms. 14 years of content wiped in a matter of days. The unaired Diamond episode still exists. The coroner, Jason Peck, watched it as part of his investigation. In September 2024, during the inquest at Winchester Coroner's Court, clips from the episode were played and were subsequently broadcast by Sky News, marking the first time any of the footage had been seen publicly. It showed the moment Diamond was told he failed the test, Carl's reaction, and the audience's response.
Since the start of your relationship with Jade, have you passionately kissed anyone else? She said no. Why did you say no, Steve?
Because I was telling the truth.
Tess says you're a liar, pal. Just so you're aware, you failed every single question.
Oh my God, I was never unfaithful.
I find it quite interesting that the audience thought you were telling the truth. I wouldn't trust you with a chocolate button, mate. Honestly, you are. I don't think you even know what the truth is.
You've done it. You've done everything. You've done it. Everything.
Jane, I haven't.
No, you're fishing, you meet her and everything. So that's wrong, is it?
Yes, I swear.
So the serial liar goes into the Jeremy Kyle lie detector and gets called a liar, and my test's wrong, yeah?
I swear I'll swear on anything.
Just all calm down a minute. Don't start crying, mate. The hardest thing of my job is I'm paid to read it out. You asked us to do that. Why would you fail? Darling, take a breath. Why would you fail?
I haven't been.
Have you lied about anything in that test? Did you kiss somebody but not have sex with them? Has something happened?
No.
You go into that test and you lie. Even when you split up, come on, I'm doing my best for you.
And I'm being straight. I'm being so straight. I am being so straight, Jeremy. I've never been more straight than this. I have not been unfaithful to her.
Why'd you fail the test then?
I don't know. I have not been unfaithful to her.
There you are, Jane. I mean, I am asked
not
to do.
Once.
I am asked to do, and then we get labelled, oh, it's unfair. You asked to do a test. He failed that. Categorically failed that, so you're aware. We stand 100% by that. It's very easy for people to sit here and say that. But we stand by that test. There are enough lies. I don't take any. This is awful.
I have not met anyone.
Was there someone he was messaging then?
Oh, yeah.
Is that true?
Yes.
The phone number. I knew it.
So you've been messaging another woman then, yeah?
When talking. The reason being.
Anybody got a shovel?
Diamond's son Carl said afterward that anyone watching the clips could see his father was in tears and being spoken to in what he called the most brutal way. The coroner ultimately found no direct causal link between the show and Diamond's death, noting that Diamond had pre-existing depression and had been prescribed antidepressants he never took. But Kyle had been designated a person of interest in the inquest, meaning the coroner believed his actions may have caused or contributed to the death. To this day, the show has never come back, and Jeremy Kyle has since moved into radio, which he did before he got his own TV show. The episode that ended 14 years of television now sits in ITV's archives, and beyond those few clips shown in court, it's never been aired and never will be. On August 19th, 2010, which by the way was my 18th birthday, yes, I'm old, the Swell Season were playing an outdoor show at the Mountain Winery in Saratoga, California, just outside San Jose. The venue itself is quite nice, set in the hills with maybe a couple of thousand seats. It's the kind of place where people would buy some wine and then settle in for the concert. A 32-year-old man named Michael Edward Pickles was in the audience that night, and he'd come with a friend. At some point during the show, around 10 o'clock, Pickles left his seat and left his personal belongings behind with his friend, who didn't think much of it at the time. Then, Pickles climbed up to the roof of the stone building behind the stage, somewhere between 30 and 40 feet above. The band had just finished playing When Your Mind's Made Up, and their lead singer, Glenn Hansard, was in a loose, playful mood, ribbing his guitarist about a song he'd written. Only 3 of the 6 band members were on stage at that point. The others were still on break. Then, Pickles jumped. He came down silently and landed on or near a speaker on the right side of the stage, just a few feet from Hansard. Because it was dark, and Pickles was wearing dark clothing, some people in the audience initially thought a piece of lighting equipment had fallen, or that it was part of the show. It wasn't until Hansen screamed for help that the reality of what had happened started to register. Audience members who were doctors or paramedics rushed to the stage and began CPR. They worked on Pickles for over half an hour before a doctor in the audience pronounced him dead. It came out afterwards that Pickles had been arrested on New Year's Day earlier that year for allegedly threatening to kill both himself and his girlfriend with a shotgun. He'd been charged with assault with a firearm and false imprisonment, released on a $150,000 bail, and was scheduled to appear in court on October 5th. He never made it. The Swell season kept their remaining dates, but were clearly shaken. They put out a statement saying they were shocked and saddened, and before their next show a couple of days later in Washington State, they posted a message explaining that performing was how they'd always coped in good times and bad, and that they hoped people wouldn't see it as a selfish act. Their manager later said that if all 6 members had been on stage rather than 3, one of them could have easily been injured or killed by the fall. The band paid for grief counseling sessions for audience members through a center in Palo Alto, offering both group and one-on-one support. As for footage, audience members were filming the concerts. Some of those recordings captured the performance leading up to the moment Pickles jumped, and some captured the aftermath with police and paramedics arriving on stage. But the footage of the fall itself has never surfaced publicly. Given that it was dark and happened without warning, it's possible no clear recording of that actual moment exists from audience cameras. Whatever was captured, none of it has been released, and there's no push from anyone involved to change that. And that's the end of the video, folks. I think I said this at the end of the last 2 Lost Media videos I made, but I really don't know if there will be another this time. There's honestly not many real-life examples of disturbing lost media left. There's plenty of movie-related stuff, but who really wants to talk about, say, Sadistic Bitch? That movie that Brad Jones the Cinema Snob made like 25 years ago. Not many, I can imagine, but if there's a demand, maybe I'll do another. Be sure to give this video a like, leave a comment, subscribe if you're new. I'd like to thank all of my patrons for their continued support, especially those whose names you're seeing on screen now, particularly Hendrik Fan 5, Sonny Hauser, Charlie Boyle, Bailey Cosmic Black Metal 96, Mimi, Pizza Guy 111, Light Into Sunlight, KJ Musical, Losanna, Brandon Field, Helen Korn, Kyle, BAN, Brendan O'Connell, Adam Clayton, Sray Wolf, Count Nagula, Danny Jade, Paul Mendoza, Alex Christmas, Bella Schwartz, Belle Siegel, Stimulate, Inquisitus Arias, and Dick the Cock Johnson and the Woodmaster of WrestleMania 69 or Maybe Not Dude. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.